and I mentioned that in the book and wish we could do that because there's some really interesting stories to be told and will be told one day about how this private collector wound up with the belt because, the story was it was stolen from WCW and, there are lots of rumors online about what happened. Some of them have some truth to them. Some of them really don't. Some of these stories just kind of grow over time on the Internet because there was such a void of information about it. But one day that story is going to be told, but it's not going to be told right now. I'm not going to be the one to tell it, at least right now. But the person who does have it is becoming more and more public with it. There's actually a Twitter account which has a link to where you can buy the book. But the Twitter account is at the Big Gold Belt, the Big Gold Belt, at the Big Gold Belt. And you'll see a lot of pictures of that original belt that he has taken when he's taken it to conventions and just kind of slides it in. I mean, he's having pictures of some of the wrestlers holding it. And they're not even aware at the time they're holding the original, some of the guys that originally held it. Some of them are. And if you go to that Twitter page, he had Ric Flair and Rick Steamboat hold it together in a picture, and that picture is on his Twitter feed from a couple of weeks ago at WrestleCon in California during WrestleMania weekend. But anyway, so that's been a lot of fun, and eventually eventually he'll come public with that. I think I know he wants to, but there was just a lot of you just as you guys know, the WWE I guess are still planning to do a brick and mortar Hall of Fame at some point. I'm not sure where that's going to be, but I'm sure they'd love to have that belt in their Hall of Fame building, and I think that's why he's wanting to try to keep it, a little clandestine for a while anyway, because he eventually knows that that may go back and done.
That would definitely be the centerpiece of any Hall of Fame, I would think. I mean, that's such a big, beautiful belt. How much? They
have the 10 pounds of gold, too.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Oh, yeah. That would be a perfect centerpiece.
Yeah, both of those belts. A lot of people say, I hate the WWF has them and all that, or WWE has them. I don't. I mean, Vince McMahon's the only, love him or hate him, and for all his bad points and good points, he at least is preserving a lot of that stuff. And really, I think Hunter, Triple H, is the one that's really behind most of that, and collecting all these artifacts from all of these wrestlers that will eventually, the public will be able to see and enjoy. And without them making that effort, a lot of that stuff would be lost. So who knows what would happen to these belts. So I'm all for it. I mean, as long as the public can have access to them at some point and be able to enjoy them, I'm all for it, and I support what they're doing.
How much do you think the Big Gold Belt is worth? Or maybe throw a guesstimate out there.
Well, there were a lot of kayfabe numbers, presented on TV at the time. Rick, I think the first number ever mentioned on television was Rick said it was $35,000 of, gold, silver, diamond, and rubies. And the actual cost of the belt, the business transaction was probably more around $12,000 or $13,000 at the time, but that wasn't its real value because if you remember, David Royal, Nelson Royal's son, was a sales rep for Crumrine. So he basically negotiated a deal with them probably at cost, their cost to make it, however he was able to do that. So probably in 1986 dollars, you're looking at around $12,000 for the belt. But what it would have been worth retail, a piece of silver that big, even at that time, was probably $20,000 to $22,000. They told me that when we were interviewing them, the people at Crumrine for the book. They would guess, and back in those days, it would have been about $22,000. With the price of silver and gold today, there's no telling what just the physical, even if you don't put the historical value on the belt itself, just the actual silver would be worth. I don't know. Whatever silver is per ounce, that's about a 9-10 pound belt. That's a lot of silver in that belt. So just the actual silver and gold on it alone would be worth a good bit today.
Is the Big Gold Belt your favorite belt of all the belts?
No, I think the 10 pounds of gold is probably my sentimental favorite, just because, the Mid-Atlantic territory got that name. It wasn't called Mid-Atlantic Wrestling until 1973, and that's when the the NWA belt, the 10 pounds of gold belt, came around in 73. And Mid-Atlantic Wrestling ended in name in 86 when it really became the NWA, even though the NWA was a separate organization. And that's when the belt changed. So my home area lines up perfectly with that belt. It was the NWA title I saw growing up, and so that's really my sentimental favorite. But as far as a work of art, you know, nothing compares to that big gold belt before or since, I don't think. I mean, there are a lot of people who have a lot of interest in belts. There's a great website called belttalk.com where people focus on nothing but belts and wrestling belts, from old belts to new belts and collectors of belts. I just think there's no belt like the big gold belt, and it has survived that image of that belt from 86 to 2015 or 14. That image of that belt is probably the longest running belt ever, and by far, I guess, of any belt that's been on television. So, you know, I love them both. It's like asking you to pick which is your favorite child, but I think my sentimental favorite is the Dome Gold belt, the 10 pounds of gold.